Welcome to the Deep Dive,
Emerald City Hockey's Seattle Kraken podcast.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Deep Dive, Emerald City Hockey Seattle Kraken podcast. RJ, we officially have Kraken games to talk about, regular season, quote unquote, meaningful hockey games to talk about. And I'm excited to talk about this. There's also been some news and notes. Kraken 1 and 2, one really solid game, 2 games. We'll see. But I think that there's been a lot of positives to take away from the young early season so far here. Excited to get into that with you and also talk about some interesting news items as well. Some fairly divisive ones in the Kraken community that we have to kind of give our opinions and share on. So definitely excited to get into that. Of course, first though, want to thank Queen Anne Beer Hall for sponsoring us and sponsoring the podcast. RJ, Kraken season is back, and boy, after that home game on Tuesday, that season opening kickoff is the afternoon game, both before and then especially after, just the amount of Kraken fans in that place. It looked like so much fun. Just to see the beer hall again packed with Seattle Kraken jerseys was just, I forgot how much I missed it.
Absolutely. And talking with the owners too, they're so excited for Kraken season to start again because they know how fun it gets in there for Kraken games. Hockey fans are a different breed, right? And it's just a different, slightly different type of atmosphere than any other sport too when you go to watch a Kraken game at Queen Anne Beer Hall. So that's so really fun. And then also, I just want to give a quick shout out to Anna in the Netherlands sending us this great email talking about the 3-pound turkey leg that we mentioned on the Oktoberfest menu, and maybe even suggesting we throw a little trigger warning in there next time, just because of how shocking that is. That's just, I guess, unheard of. She says that, 3-pound turkey leg for us is a 10-person dish. It was kind of hard for them to wrap their minds around it. So, really enjoyed that email from you, Anna.
Yes. It was a lot of fun when we got that email. Look, we thought 3 pounds was a lot. Like, it is.
I had to assure her, like, this is not normal. You don't see this every place where Queen Anne Beer Hall just goes extra hard at these sort of things.
That they do. The other thing that I want to mention quickly before we get into the podcast is that tomorrow night for the Kraken's game against the Nashville Predators, that is our live game commentary over at patreon.com/Emerald City Hockey. So if you want to come by, whether you're already a Terror of the Deep tier patron, you've thought about joining, maybe want to check it out, you can do a 7-day trial and join us tomorrow night as we watch the game right there with the community. We always have a great time watching the game, breaking things down as they happen, having fun during the intermissions and the downtime. It's just always a great time.
Yeah, it's kind of the best of both worlds, right? There are so many little takeaways that the two of us have during a game that really don't fit into a tweet or, maybe even aren't mentioned on post game sometimes, right? Where we just kind of forget them, like, oh yeah, that was a nice little quick stick play by Daccord there. That's just not a big enough thing to talk about later. But we mention all of those on a live commentary, right? We get to share that with everybody. And then the intermissions are so fun. They get a little off the rails sometimes with, some crazy food takes or some jokes, and, Afro might sometimes make an appearance. Fuji might make an appearance. It's always a really fun time.
Yeah, so I'm really looking forward to that. We had a lot of fun last month with the pregame one. I felt like that was a good one, getting to check things out. So excited for that with everybody tomorrow, and just wanted to remind everybody again, patreon.com/Emerald City Hockey. All right, so RJ, let's get into the news items first, then we'll kind of break down. We don't necessarily need to break down the games themselves, but really how the Kraken are playing later. But first things first, Kraken have a new captain. I know this feels like old news for like anybody who's really following the team, but it was 6 days ago that Jordan Eberly, right before that game on Tuesday to kick off the new season, was named captain by the Seattle Kraken.
Right. I wouldn't fully call it a deep dive curse, even though it happened 6 days ago, kind of right after our last episode. We thought they might release it, maybe an hour after we recorded, but no, the Kraken saved it for a very special moment right during player intros, right before their home opener. And look, we'd seen some rumblings maybe about it happening, but I think really until it was real, we didn't know for sure. And I think the team did a very good job of keeping the secret there. We only found out when the NHL submitted their official roster report, which it has to be on there on the official roster. So we saw that, figured we knew what was coming, and then Jordan Eberly skates out of the tunnel for player intros and is introduced as the captain.
Well, they did a great bait and switch with it too, because he comes out for warm-ups.
That's right.
And there is no C on that jersey.
In fact, he's wearing an A too. It's
Yeah.
just two A's. That's exactly how it would look if there was no captain that night.
Yes. So they really wanted to keep the surprise for the player intro announcement. Good on them for doing that, and for, in this day and age of social media and things leaking and all that kind of stuff, being able to keep that under wraps until the big moment was a big deal. So first off, I guess we'll just talk about it, right? Ebbs is captain. You and I have been talking about it all off season. It was the choice that made the most sense, just given everything involved. Veteran player, good guy in the locker room, good guy with the media, only got 2 years on his contract, so like you can foresee a passing of the torch to one of the younger leaders down the line right there built in. This one was just the logical choice.
Right. The contract timing is perfect with it being there for 2 years. He was already one of the most, if not the most respected player in the room. It's definitely the clear choice in a lot of ways. I have talked about it in the past. He's probably not who I would have picked just because of how everything went down last season. I mean, if you want my whole spiel on that, I've mentioned it in previous podcasts. That said, he has really impressed me so far. Mm-hmm. In through the first 3 games, and we can kind of get into that when we talk about the takeaways from the games. But as far as his leadership by example, he's been excellent so far. And he talked about his leadership style a little bit too after that first game. That was really the first chance we had to talk to him after being named captain. It was right after that game against the Blues, and he mentioned something that really we already kind of knew, is just, I'm not a rah guy. I'm more of a lead by example type of guy. And if that's the case, you really got to lead by example on the ice. And so far he has. So I've been impressed early on. And then as far as Bilesma's take on it too, I mean, he agrees. He says it was an obvious choice to name Jordan Eberly captain. I did ask him a little bit more about the process of naming a captain, kind of how they came to that decision. And he said it's an organizational thing. It's a Ron Francis decision. It's a Dan Bilesma decision. But I think it's also an evident one. And he talked about even past training camps coming in when he was the Firebirds coach. You get some familiarity with the Kraken players being in the organization already. And from what he saw, it sounds like there was really no other choice or option. It just was the obvious choice to him.
Yeah. And I think it felt that way to all of us on the outside as well. For this.
I think we would have been shocked if it was anyone else.
Yes, definitely. So congrats to Jordan Eberly for being named captain. Kind of a piece of news that goes with it is that they do replace the A that Jordan Eberly is leaving behind. Goes on to Matty Beniers' sweater. That was, I think, the big thing that really kind of surprised me the most by the whole process. It wasn't so much that Eberly was named captain or that they named a captain. It was that, they went ahead and they filled that spot with another alternate captain there, and it's Matty Beniers.
Yeah, and a year ago, that probably wouldn't have shocked us in the slightest, right?
No.
But, had a tough year last year, and I think it is the next progression, though, in him kind of assuming more of a leadership role on the team. And you don't want to put too much on his plate as he's just trying to kind of turn his game around on the ice from last season. But I think it's something that he can handle. It's something that Bilesma seems to feel very confident that he can handle. And there's a good leadership group around him, too. If it's, it's a totally different, if you, slap the C on Matty or whatever, that's a big deal, right?
Yeah.
When he's trying to work on so many other things. But I think in this leadership group full of vets, like, he'll be fine and he'll fit in.
Right. And there's still a lot of alternates on this team. I think it makes a lot of sense. And it's got to be something too, that for him, it's got to be nice between the contract and this to feel the support of the organization behind you coming off of a down year, a year in which you did struggle last year. Walking into the new season, the new expectations for everybody, the new kind of positive energy, the new culture that the organization's building. It's got to feel really good if you're him to have the organization back you in both of those two ways going into the season like this. And so I'm happy for him and excited for him. The other big piece of kind of like player news here, RJ, was that we had a contract extension this past week for one Joey Daccord. It's a 5x5 deal. And this one kind of surprised me. This one really seemed to come out of nowhere for me, RJ. I don't know about you, but this one, I was not expecting a Joey extension. If it was going to happen during like mid-season, I would have expected it in the back half of the season. I was not expecting it, this past week.
Yeah, not at all. And actually, if you go back to our mailbag, right, before the start of the season, we got a question about which of the pending UFAs, kind of what's the next order of business there. Do you try and re-sign any of them? And I think we both agreed, well, yeah, none of these guys you do right away. These
Right.
are all guys you kind of wait on to see how the season progresses. We certainly didn't see this coming, but surprise news, we wake up to this and Joey Daccord, well, I wake up to this, you probably didn't.
Yeah.
And Joey Daccord has signed a 5-year extension. So the term surprised me as well.
Yeah.
At $5 million AAV, the AAV, didn't shock me as much as the timing or the term. But yeah, this was just a kind of a big surprise. And so normally I would react to something like this very quickly on social media. And I put even out a tweet just saying, hey, sorry, everyone, I had a late beer league game. Just like, give me a second to type out my thoughts. And then it ended up being like an hour and a half before I could really kind of gather all my thoughts and get a proper reaction to it, just because it caught me so off guard.
Right. It is just the timing of it is strange because it didn't really need to happen. The term and money of it also, because it implies something very big regarding the other goaltender that this team has in Philip Grubauer. And that's partly why I didn't think we would see something like this so early on in the year. But by signing Joey to a 5x5 deal, you're kind of announcing like, hey, we see him as, obviously you're committing to him as a franchise, and you think he is a franchise guy for you, and he is a goaltender that you want around for a long time and that you view as your franchise goaltender. But what it also means is, from a financial standpoint, from a cap standpoint, there's no way a team is going to run into a season like next year with $10.9 million against the cap just in net. Like, that's not happening. No team is going to do that, especially a team that is already in a difficult cap situation the way the Kraken are right now, with the highest payroll against the cap. Well, not even having a full roster, right? Which is a whole nother discussion to get into, and how things have handled. So, like, the thing about this that most stands out to me, RJ, because you can get into the term for a goalie who hasn't played that many games and all of that kind of stuff with Joey. But what this basically signaled to me was, we're going to be moving on from Grubauer next year. By signing this deal, we're committing to Joey, and we're signaling that. And that means something has to happen to Grubauer next offseason, whether it's a buyout, whether it's a trade, something like that. And it's very curious that you would do that this early on into a season. Just kind of send that message to one of your two goaltenders that, like, the clock's ticking on you, bud.
Right. And maybe you hope that that's the kind of thing that can spark somebody to play better, I guess. But I wouldn't like that. If it was me putting myself in that situation, I certainly wouldn't like that. And so you do create that dynamic as well. I mean, some teams do have 11 mil or so in net, but the Kraken are an outlier there because, look, they're set to have the fourth most expensive goalie tandem in the NHL next year by the current numbers, current guys under contract, which that means there are 3 teams in front of them that are paying that. But you look at any team in that range, really in the top 7 or 8, that's spending like 10 mil or more on their goaltending tandem, they all have a star goalie, like somebody who they're paying in the $8 million or more range, a guy who's a true bona fide star. And then, a backup that's in the 2 mil or 3 mil range, right? And that gets you to that level. The Kraken are the only team in that range with like 2 $5 million guys. Teams just don't usually allocate their goaltending money in that way. And I do think that is a hint that, they probably don't plan to for much longer.
Yeah, it's because it's by doing that, you're basically saying we got 2 guys that are above average, and we're going to pay and kind of keep them around. And I don't think anybody has ever really made that situation successful once both guys have had to get paid, right? It's always been easy. Like Boston last year, Ullmark and Swayman. Well, Swayman didn't need to get paid yet, right? The moment Swayman needs to get paid, that tandem doesn't exist anymore. For this situation, it feels like a strange message to send so early in the season. Obviously, you're sending a very positive one Joey's direction, but it doesn't feel the same. It's not the same going the other way towards Philip Grubauer and for all of us looking at it. So that's going to be an interesting kind of thing to monitor over the course of the season, because yeah, in some ways you could look at it from a motivational standpoint for Philip Grubauer, because whether you're bought out or they want to try to trade you, maybe even later this season or certainly next offseason, you do want to look good so that you have value for somebody else come whichever one of those two directions it goes in. You want somebody to want you.
Right. It almost turns into kind of a pseudo contract year, even though it's not really.
Yes. So it's kind of it's just a very strange, weird situation that I truly did not believe we were going to be seeing a game into the season, right? Like when
and before Joey had even played a game.
Yeah. Like absolutely wild to not, like they must have been close during training camp. Like you wouldn't do this during like the timing on it.
Right. And that's because Joey said that they started talks during the summer.
Yeah.
That clearly both sides were interested in this. And I totally get why Joey's interested in this, right?
Absolutely.
Long-term deal, good money. I mean, this is your bag for your whole career, really. This is your chance. So totally get it on Joey's side why he wants to get this thing done. Also, he's the kind of guy I think that just doesn't like those kind of distractions. He wants to focus on the hockey. And he said as much himself. He wants to focus on hockey. He wants to play hockey. So I get that. I do not understand the timing from a team perspective. And also for cap reasons too. And I got into that in my tweet or whatever. I don't know how deep you want me to get into that on this. I probably don't have the time for it, but the timing is baffling to me.
The timing's really weird. I was going to say because we'll probably talk a little bit about the cap stuff later when we're talking about the team and the performance of some of the players and the offseason acquisitions that they've made this year and things. But I do think, because we have seen some people like bring this up, whether it's on Discord, Twitter, or in the post game. I think we're both at the point. I mean, we were already at this point, like this offseason kind of cemented it, but this Joey thing, like even more so kind of pushes it over the top. Yeah. Ron Francis and managing the cap, it's not good. Right? Like the situation that the Kraken are in from a cap perspective, not even counting the Joey situation next year when the extension actually kicks in, it's horrendous. Like it's bad. Like this is arguably the worst cap managed team in the entire league because you are right there at it. You have $4,000 in cap space and you still have 2 open rosters, but you're not even paying for a whole roster. And then on top of it, you're paying for a roster that, look, on paper and on the ice, based on results we've seen in previous seasons and already this season, this is not a cup contending team. You do not have star level players out there that are guys that put up 100 points a season and all of that stuff. And so for the Kraken to be paying more than anybody else in the league for a team that is at best a bubble playoff team, and you don't even have 23 guys on the roster, right? Like you have Vince Dunn injured right now. You have no healthy options if somebody else gets hurt, and you have no ability to call somebody up. Like it's mismanagement is what it is, right? Like that's the only word for it.
And it's not just the short-term situation of the team too, where look, you can live with that. You could trade a Tanev or a Gord or whatever and get out of that short-term situation. You can pay for a full roster. The team doesn't change that much. But what really got driven home to me with this Joey extension, and as okay as this deal could be in isolation, it's part of a pattern of contracts really in the last 4 or 5 months that have really done away with a lot of long-term flexibility that this team has. This contract, along with some others, and I'm talking Stevenson, Montour, Larson, it's given me real concern for the long-term flexibility of this team. And that Ron Francis is making a lot of risky bets. And if those bets don't pan out for him, I mean, look, he probably won't be around as the GM, but the next GM is going to have some real problems on his hands if that is the case. And so that's where I worry about it too, is it's not just right now. It's not just that $4,000 number that they're having to grapple with that maybe in a week's time you need to move somebody because you're that tight. This is a problem that is going to potentially persist for years.
Right. And that's something that we were always optimistic about the Kraken's future, right? Like during a lot of the dark times last season, one of the things we could bank on was like, yes, but look at this long-term flexibility they have. Like, yeah, you're going to need to sign Matty to an extension. At some point, Shane will need one, all of that kind of stuff. But they don't have a lot of contracts on the books long-term. Like you had that. You had this ability over the course of 2 or 3 off seasons to remake your team around whatever core group of players you decide exist. And Ron really went out there and said, I'm going to do that all during this one off season. And and it was a bad offseason to do it, as we knew all along. It wasn't a great free agency year, and it's very puzzling that they decided to do it the way that they have, and they're already suffering the consequences for it. 3 games into the season, you're right up against it, where again, you don't have a healthy option if somebody gets hurt, and you don't have the ability without making a trade to have a healthy option. That's crazy.
Yeah, you do have the emergency recalls that you can kind of continue to do. You still have to play a game short, but like that's no way to operate through any long stretch of time. And all it takes is one injury, and you're really right up against it. And it seems like that one injury has already happened.
Yeah, with Vince Dunn. So the Kraken are practicing in Nashville right now. Still no word on Vince Dunn, and of course got injured in their game against Minnesota, game 2 of the season. Missed yesterday's game against Dallas. We haven't seen anything about him being at practice in Nashville. I would still think that the earliest that I could see him coming back would be, again, not knowing the injury or anything, would just be I could see them waiting until the home game on Thursday, just because. But who knows with whatever upper body injury he's dealing with.
Yeah, I would expect the team to proceed with caution, because you look at Dunn's injury at the end of last year. This one, it didn't look good to me, going up against the boards in that upper body area. It could be like a collarbone, shoulder type of thing. I think you'd want to be cautious with a player who is as good as Vince Dunn is, and as important to this team as Vince Dunn is. But it does present some real problems for you, not just on the ice from a play perspective, which we'll of course talk about right when we get into the games, but off ice from a cap perspective, where now Josh Mahura comes into the lineup and you don't have an extra.
Right.
That's it. Everybody who's on the roster and healthy is playing for you. And if one more guy gets banged up, then you're going to be forced into some kind of a move.
Yeah. So again, didn't mean to be so negative at the start of the podcast, everybody, but it's a decision that was made, and all of this stuff has been made in a way that I've never seen a team operate before. I've never seen this before, RJ.
I've seen things close enough, but they're not anything you'd want to emulate.
No, it's close, and they've all been like weird, bad situations that like you just don't want it like this. So, I just feel like we had to kind of put that in context as like this is not a good situation. Now,
it's been on both of our minds a lot this past week. I just think we needed to get it out there.
There was another controversy that I was not expecting to happen at all, RJ. This one really, really kind of took me by surprise, and that is that the Davy Jones hat for kind of Kraken player of the game in the locker room is no more. It has instead been replaced with the Seattle Kraken WWE belt, and a belt that is available to purchase by everybody due to a partnership between the NHL and
how much is it? Was it $450 or $550? I forget which one it was.
I don't remember.
Does it really matter at that point?
It doesn't matter. No, it's kind of ridiculous on that side of things. And there was immediate backlash and even sustained backlash now that we're a couple days removed from this, RJ, on this not being a very popular move with a lot of the fan base, and really just like anybody on the outside does not really seem to understand this one. I don't love it because I'm not really a wrestling guy. I've never really understood the whole belt thing. Like I've been a boxing fan in the past. I get it like kind of there. I'm not a huge like into that world. That's not really my scene. I think the belt doesn't really look that great. It looks kind of cheap to me, especially for how much it costs on our end if we were to purchase one. So like that there is that component that I will agree with everybody for. What I won't agree with is the kind of pushback on getting rid of the Davy Jones hat, because I very much feel like, RJ, with these player of the game items that locker rooms hand out, that is a locker room thing. That is something that the players do amongst themselves to recognize each other within their workspace, right? To have your coworker or your peer recognize the performance that you had. And I feel like that, because of the nature of that, and because of in the past, it's only been very recently in the last couple of years that this has been a more public thing for fans to kind of be involved and see the videos of when these things get passed around and stuff. Because of that, I want to take the stance of, look, if they decided this, let them decide this. This is their thing. This is one of the very few things in their job that they actually do have kind of power over. And so I want them to be able to exercise that power and have that amongst themselves and use whatever symbol they decide for the year they want to use to represent the mentality that they want to have each and every time they go out there on the ice for us. And so I kind of want to take that track, but I do understand that, Davy Jones' hat was pretty cool. This doesn't look as good, that's for sure. But I do feel that, if I want them to have the power to decide this, and because it really is a thing for them. It's not really a thing for us on the outside.
Right. And I do understand, some of the fan reaction because, I mean, as with social media, right, we are kind of let in on this locker room, team tradition. And I will agree with you too. The belt is objectively worse than the Davy Jones hat.
Yeah.
It just, as an item by itself, it just is.
Right.
Like it's, you can buy it online. It looks kind of cheap. It's, I think, kind of cheesy. The Davy Jones hat, I just think it looks really cool. But again, it also has something more to do with, the team, and like it's actually themed versus the belt is like you can get one for all 32 NHL teams, I believe. It's
Yes.
kind of generic in that way as well. So I get that completely, but I'm with you, Dylan. This should be something that the players choose and that the players want to earn, right? That's where the origin of how this kind of tradition started, right? Is there would be some kind of item that wasn't picked by the upper brass of the team, that was kind of picked out by the players, right? That they wanted to choose to give amongst each other for the players that earned it. And you can see that too. And it's the player's choice, right? The social media team, the coach, nobody else decides who gets it next. It's the players deciding among themselves which one gets it next and who earned it in that game. And so you want it to be something that they want to earn, that they want to play hard for, and that has meaning to them. So I'm with you. I think whatever it is, it should be chosen by the players and not, ownership or anybody else. And so I think in that way, it's an improvement, just like you said. And I basically agree with your position on it. As much as it is, I think just objectively a worse item.
Yes, it is. It's not a great item. You could question the decision behind going with it as the trophy or the whatever it is you want to call it. But I think that this is one of the times in which the players get to dictate something for themselves rather than having ownership inserting themselves. We'll call it into the locker room. Right? Like, which you could argue was the case with the Davy Jones hat, right? It's coming from Jerry Bruckheimer, who's one of the owners of the team who has access to this screen use prop and blah, 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 blah. That's not really what this tradition in hockey has ever been about. And I was trying to find the origins of it, RJ, and there's like a couple articles detailing some of the history. I couldn't pin down like a definitive origin, but a lot of the ones that have been going on for a longer period of time. First off, most of them change year to year. I know Kraken haven't done that in the past, but a lot of them change year to year to represent the mentality, like to become a symbol of the mentality of what that team wants to be their identity for that season, their cultural identity. And that's why a lot of times you see like hard hats, shovels, that kind of stuff, because it represents that kind of like workman culture that the team wants to have out there on the ice. So I like the idea of it changing each year to represent, the symbolism of the identity that the team and the player of the game should have each and every time they go out there. So I don't have an issue with it changing either. But like a lot of them are situations like the Rangers back in 2011 got this like fedora, and it was purchased by Brad Richards off of a woman in a nightclub for $100 while they were in Sweden. You know what I mean? Like, and it just like became a thing. They kind of did it while they were all drunk at the club. And then it became like a thing that they just kind of started doing as they were going around. But like it very much had symbolic meaning to those players because it was from a group outing amongst them. Right. And so it kind of represented that. Or with go for
Dylan, have you seen the Blue Jackets, the one that they just started this year? Did you see that?
No, I haven't.
So it's a post game. It's like a donkey hat, and it just like has a little like donkey head on it, right? And because in honor of Johnny Gaudreau, he loved calling people a donkey. He loved to chirp people and call them donkey. And so for their teammate that they want to honor, right? It's the donkey, and so I just like it has a special meaning when it kind of comes from the players.
Yeah. So I like that kind of thing about it, and I just think yes, it's questionable that it's an object that we can buy because in the past that's never really been the thing. right? Outside of it being like a very common object, like a hard hat. So like that component of it is a little weird. And I've seen some people maybe bring up the idea that it was chosen as like a partnership and like to promote the purchase of these belts. If that was the case, like all 32 teams would be doing it. I can't imagine the Kraken decided to be the one group that was going to shill for the WWE, the NHL. Like I really just genuinely don't believe that. But just the fact that that exists is like just an added component that didn't really need to be there. Like again, you could have gone with something else and you would not have had these allegations, so to speak.
Yeah, that is true. Yeah, and I guess I feel like maybe at least like shill for an official sponsor or something. I don't like if you're going to do something like that. I don't know.
Here's the keys to the Enterprise Rent-A-Car, the official rent-a-car sponsor of the NHL for the player of the game. Here you go. Jordan Eberly, you've earned it. You've earned the ability to drive this Toyota RAV4 around till our next win.
Exactly. If you're gonna do it all the way. Right?
You got to do it right. Yes. This is the NHL's problem forever, RJ. They just don't know how to really do it right.
We'll suggest it to the guys for next season.
Yes. All right. So there's that. We can move on to the on ice performance here, RJ, and talk about these 3 games. You have game 1, which the Kraken, have a very solid first period, come out in the second period, put up 2 goals, looked like everything was working. The new systems were clicking, guys were finding each other, lots of puck movement in the offensive zone. You were surviving the odd lapses you were having in the defensive zone, but hey, guess what? Everything was good. And then there was about a 5-minute stretch where momentum shifts hard, very much in favor of the Blues. Blues take advantage of it. Kraken kind of get caught a little flat-footed. 3 goals go on the board, and then from there, the Kraken just really were never able to regain it, weren't able to find their game in the third period. St. Louis makes some adjustments. Kraken did not make counter adjustments to that, and the game kind of fizzled out from a Kraken perspective, and that was just it. And you lose the game at home there to kick off the season. Bounce back 4 days later, it's this
Such
wacky schedule on the road in Minnesota. Play one of the most fun hockey games that you can watch, as it's back and forth affair. Kraken come back multiple times from goal deficits to tie the game, send it to overtime, win it in a shootout. Fantastic performance from all the guys in that one. Tons of fun for all of us watching the game. It was just a great hockey game, great experience. And then last night against the Dallas Stars, you have to do the brutal back-to-back of Minnesota, fly a couple hours down to Dallas, go play a hockey game against a very good Dallas Stars team last night. Low event, pretty boring game, pretty opposite of what the Minnesota game was. And you have a 13-second stretch where you make some poor decisions. Dallas is able to put up 2 goals in that 13 seconds, and then that was it. That was just all that game was. Kind of quickly summarizing those games, RJ, what are your feelings kind of going through that again? Because I have some.
Yes, I do too. And I think, look, it's 3 games into the season. This is not a finished product for the team. I think we've given that kind of caveat, that warning a lot throughout the preseason through training camp. That said, I think there are some early takeaways that, maybe we can read into a little bit. I guess I'll start with the good. I'm seeing more varied ways of trying to score and trying to generate offense that I didn't see last year under Hackstall. I'm seeing those flashes of going to the net. I can tell that's something that the team, even if they don't do it consistently, wants to be part of their identity. Moving pucks to the slot quickly from the corners. Like, we're seeing the things that they've worked on through practices, through training camp, make their way into games. It's not happening as consistently as you like, but you're seeing it. Or whether it's like the backdoor plays, whether it's on the power play, even strength, whatever, working on those kind of passes. I'm seeing the vision. I'm seeing it go into reality in games. The consistency is an issue, but it gives me hope that they can get there. On the downside, I guess my biggest concern is still the team's ability to score goals. And, they have scored 6 goals through 3 games. It's averaging 2 a game. That's, less than last season. Still very early sample size. But I do think they're going to need more varied ways to generate offense when that plan A, as you've liked to talk about on postgame, when that plan A is taken away, you need a better plan B. And also, just from looking at this group of players that's been assembled, I still don't know that there's enough talent to score enough goals. I still have that question. And it hasn't really gotten answered. So Dylan, what are your thoughts on the first 3 games generally?
Yeah, so I've liked a lot of the same positives that you brought up. There's a lot of system stuff that I think has been good. There's been the fact that in the 2 games where you were playing teams kind of, on par with you on paper, right? Whether it's Minnesota or St. Louis in game 1, you have good performances from this group where it felt like, whether it's in St. Louis, whether it's the St. Louis game where you dominate the first period, right? Like the shots were greatly in favor of the Kraken. And even for the most part, you dominate period 2. It's just, the momentum swing kills you and they didn't really know how to deal with it or get out of it. I like that aspect of it. They looked like the better team because they should have looked like the better team. That wasn't always the case previously with them. The Minnesota game, you found a way, being down 2 goals, to come back. You're down, additional goals later on and throughout the game, and you continue to find a way to come back. You force overtime, right? We always say good teams here find a way to get a point, blah, 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 all that kind of stuff. And then you also take care of business in the shootout and you get the extra point, right? Like that to me was just such a solid performance and something that just genuinely the team was not capable of doing last year. They did not come back from a 2-goal deficit all of last season. Like that was something that they could not do last year, and they were able to do it in the 2nd game of the season, right? And they showed that resiliency, and they showed that they could go out there and that they could grind out some goals, right? We don't have a true difference maker from an offensive standpoint, somebody who can just go out there and manufacture something on their own. So we got to go out there and we've got to really earn it. And they earned all of those goals that they scored in Minnesota. And that was really impressive. And like I said, that was something that they could not do last year. So I'm really happy about that one. I'm more or less willing to throw out the Dallas game just because it is back-to-back nights. You're playing a really good team in Dallas. As we talked about last night, it was kind of a scheduled loss just because you're playing a really good team and it's on the back-to-back. It's kind of awkward. And really, as we talked about, if you're the underdog coming into that game, your best avenue path to victory is to just kind of shut them down, don't really let too much happen, and then hope at some point along the way you get a bounce. They make a defensive coverage mistake. You take advantage of it, something along those lines. And instead it was you have the mistake that leads to the first goal. Everybody's just kind of not really ready to go off the face-off for goal number 2. And you get that second one 13 seconds later. But the fact that you more or less kept Dallas at bay and you played good road periods against a team that is better than you on the second night of a back-to-back, like, there's enough there that I can say there was the bad and you lost the game, but I feel like some of that good kind of washes it out. And so I'm kind of willing to throw that away. And what that tells me is then if I just look at the first 2 games, RJ, I see a team that understands they have to kind of grind it out and they have to put themselves in the best positions possible to score goals because that's the only way they're going to. Right? There's no McDavid on this team. There's no McKinnon. There's no, anybody like that on this group. They're going to have to find ways of scoring. And when I look at the first 2 games, they did that, right? They found ways to score in the St. Louis game. They found ways to score in the Minnesota game. They just have to clean up some net front defensive stuff, and they have to watch out for momentum because that was kind of brutal in the St. Louis game. And if I bring the Dallas game back into it, it was kind of brutal in that Dallas game too. So they got to find a way to not fall victim to momentum, right? You give up a goal, you got to be ready to go for that next one because in both of these 2 games that you've lost, it has been a very short amount of time in which the other team has been able to damage you, right? Can't get much shorter than 13 seconds in the Dallas game, but it was only a 5-minute stretch in that St. Louis game where St. Louis scores all their goals against you. They have to find a way of being, once things start to go in that direction or you allow 1 goal, don't let that continue to snowball on you. That is really the thing that they have to clean up.
Right. And the consistency there as well. I mean, you look at the Minnesota game and I thought they had kind of learned the lesson from St. Louis, right? And it was actually a less than 2-minute stretch when St. Louis got all 3 of their goals. And it felt like some of the Kraken's most dangerous shifts in that Minnesota game were the shifts right after they had been scored on. Mm-hmm. And they were able to come back and answer and do all those things that you want to see. In Dallas, it happens once. There's literally only one kind of opportunity or one situation like that, and they mess it up about as bad as you can. But yeah, that's the thing. We're seeing the flashes. We're seeing the good that you want to see. It's just not consistent enough.
Mhm.
And I think that's just what needs to come together. I think we're seeing a lot of the positives, and that's why you're hearing from Dan, from the players, right, that they see the positives. It's just about putting them together consistently enough and against the opponents where you really need to, that's going to matter.
Right. And so, look, that's a teachable thing. That's a learnable thing. That's something that they can work on is kind of figuring that out. And it's something that as Dan spends more time with the team, he'll get a better read from a coaching perspective on how that's going on. The leadership group will get a better perspective as they go through this of kind of what happens in those situations. It seemed like they made that adjustment for that second game, and maybe it's just you're just too tired on the back-to-back to kind of have that same mentality in the Dallas game the next night. Only time is going to tell there for this group, but it really felt like that more than anything was the big negative for this team. Otherwise, there was just so many positives as far as improvements over what the squad was last year, what they were able to do on the ice last year, that I feel like, yes, it was a 1-2 week for the Kraken, but I just don't feel that bad about it because of kind of the situations. I'm willing to excuse some of it and to say that, look, this is really the one negative that killed you. Just work on that. Just focus on that.
Right. And especially with this next week coming up where it's Nashville, Philly, Calgary. You've got your first week out of the way. Your second week is 3 games against 3 beatable teams, not necessarily easy teams, easy opponents, but teams you should be able to beat if you play well and play your game. And I think the way the schedule shakes out now, especially with 2 of those games at home, that's kind of what you want in this second little stretch, right? It was a tough setup with the home game and then the road trip and all the days off. Now you're getting into the meat of things where it's every other day. That's the rhythm that you want. And you get to go out and play against 3 teams that are kind of in the middle to bottom of what we expect the standings to be.
Right. So, this is going to be a big week for the Kraken. I still feel generally positive about it, though. I feel like if they can just get a little bit more consistent, and we've said that several times throughout this has been what has been Dan's talking point from the beginning of training camp up through now, which has just been, look, we're implementing systems. They're not revolutionary systems. These are things that guys should have played under before. It's nothing special, but what we want to get really good at is our execution and being consistent with them. Like, he has talked about this, and he's also said it's going to take about 20 games in his mind before all of that stuff's going to really start coming together, and they're going to be playing it consistently and performing in that way. So I'm also willing to, listen to the guy in charge who was trying to set our expectations, who saw all this coming, right? Who knew there was going to be growing pains and there was going to be times in which, yes, it was going to be difficult for them to score in the offensive zone because it was going to just be different for them, and they were going to struggle with consistency as he's also moving lines around, right? And they're trying to find consistent groups that they want to have out there. I think a lot of this, I know it's difficult to watch, and it's especially like the St. Louis game where you're up and you kind of blow the lead. It's really tough from a fan perspective to kind of embrace that and stomach it and say, well, it's okay, we're improving after the year we had last year. But I think we kind of have to divorce ourselves from the year last year, focus on and the words of Coach Dan Bylsma, and that is, like, kind of give this group 20 games to kind of pull it together. And it might be a little roller coastery through this first month and a half of the season, but after that, hopefully things will be all right. And, I think there's enough positives from what we've seen that we can do that.
Yeah, and in the meantime, just pick up points however you can. Just pick up enough. Because as I've said, I think many times on this podcast, right, you can't secure a playoff spot or get yourself into that race for sure this early in the season, but you can take yourself out of it. And as long as you don't take yourself out of it, like, let's say, they don't come back and earn a point or two, they lose in regulation in Minnesota, then you're really worried about, okay, we don't have any points to show for this. It's a problem. But you get a win that, even a little bit ugly, I think at times I would describe it, right? But you get the 2 points, and that's enough. And it just buys you time to figure out your game.
Exactly. We talked about this, I think last week, where it was, just go like 500 through those first 20 games, right? Like just tread water while you figure things out, and then afterwards go out there and you can make a push for the playoffs if you're then above 500 the rest of the way after the 20 games. So I think that's the big thing to remember, is just that like the team, like this comes right from the team, right? From the one person who's going to know more about this than any of us, has all along been setting this expectation. We maybe didn't listen to it at the beginning of training camp, but now that the regular season's underway and it's obvious the stuff that he saw coming, we should maybe internalize it and let it happen a little bit there.
Yeah, I think that's a good message. Now, are there any kind of specific things we want to get into, I guess, with how the team's been playing? You know, like whether it's the line, certain players that have stood out to us, you know, because you have something kind of on your list. I've got a bunch of stuff in my notes, but no real like order that I feel like makes obvious sense.
Yeah, the top thing on my list was actually special teams, and it was just to rope special teams into that previous discussion, which is they're really still just figuring that stuff out. So like I'm ignoring the fact that, you know, the power plays at 14.3% and the PKs at like 71.5% because the special teams was always going to come along a little bit slower than the 5-on-5 game. So I'm fine with kind of the special teams performance so far. It's been like decent enough. It's fine.
In fact, I'm actually kind of encouraged, like by the power play performance. I'm encouraged. And I know coming off that Dallas game where they had a bunch of power play opportunities they didn't convert on, they had some real chances still, and they were moving the puck around. Really, these 3 games better than what I saw last season as a whole. It just, the things that they're attempting, and you can tell the things they're trying to make work, are the kind of plays that will score goals if you can just get that execution down. And I have a ton of confidence they'll be able to do that. So I'm still really encouraged by what I'm seeing on the power play, even though the results aren't fully there yet.
Yeah, it's literally been our wish list from last year, right? Player and puck movement. Can't argue with it, right? Like it's exactly what we asked for is what we're getting, and I think that we're going to see more results from it as the group gets more and more reps with each other. And you know, obviously having like a Vince Dunn back will help once he comes back for the second unit, all that kind of stuff. All right, so that's the first thing I had. RJ, what's the first thing you had?
So I alluded to it a little bit earlier when I talked about Jordan Eberly and being named the captain, and how I've really been impressed by what I've seen from him on the ice, because that's the kind of leader he needs to be. And he certainly has been. And so I think it's worth talking about him and also his line that we've seen so far. But I want to single out one particular moment where I felt like it was a great leadership moment in the game. And it was in the Minnesota game where the Kraken were down 2-0. You know, it's a tough spot that they're in. And through the first period, they really had not gone to the net at all. You look at the shot chart and there was nothing, just this big void right around the crease or anywhere near it. And Jordan Eberly gets them started with maybe the greasiest goal I've seen in a while. I mean, that puck was just sitting down there on the goal line. He was hack and whack time, as John Forsland loves to say. And Eberly was the guy who went and did that himself. And it got everybody going. He scores 2 goals in the game in that period. Actually, he gets the next one to tie it, but setting the tone for how the team needs to play, I thought was a big kind of captain moment for him. And it's not the kind of thing I even saw a ton from him last year, but I said, slap the C on someone's chest is not going to change the kind of person they are. But I feel like at least early on in the season, he is taking on that extra little bit of responsibility on the ice. And so I've been impressed by him. The underlying numbers are also really good for him and his line, because now I think it's time to talk about that line where he's been playing recently with Shane Wright and Jared McCann. And that line has been doing fantastic. And I know you talked with me about it a little bit like this morning, I think before starting recording, where you had kind of explain that what you thought would happen. You like the chemistry between Wright and Eberly. Maybe I should let you make this point, but you figured that Eberly would kind of do the work in the corner, get behind the net and throw pucks out to Shane Wright in those shooting areas. And it's actually been the reverse a little bit, where Shane Wright's going to do that work down low. Eberly's getting those shooting areas. And so Eberly's kind of been the one getting the goals, producing the offense, but still they're both good at it. It's been working for both of them. And I know you'd like to maybe see someone besides Jared McCann on the other wing, just someone who can muck it up a little bit, free Shane Wright up to get into those shooting areas. But overall, that line, I think you could argue, might be the team's best so far through these first 3 games. And I think that's a great sign too, because one of the things you're really going to need as the Kraken this season is for Shane Wright to be a difference maker in any line he's playing on, to be a difference-making line for you. And so far they have been.
I was going to say, I don't know what kind of argument people could have to maybe say that a different line has been playing better. I mean, certainly the fourth line has been out there, maybe a little bit more energized and kind of all over the place in a way that's maybe a little bit more noticeable. But this line has been their best line. Look, I mean, there's so many things I want to talk about with this line here. The first thing being that, yes, we talked earlier, right? Kraken do not have that difference maker who can go out there and just manufacture goals on their own and be the guy in the way that other teams do. But Shane Wright might be the closest player to that you actually have. I know Jared McCann has been that for the past couple seasons. I think Shane Wright has more of that potential in him. There's a reason he was a projected first overall pick, somebody you did take in the top 4 in the draft. He should be that kind of guy, right? That is what his ceiling should be for you. I think a lot of what I was seeing and what I was thinking would happen when we were kind of talking about what lines do we want to see before the season started and all that, was that chemistry that he and Jordan Eberly have is so special. And we saw that on display in the Shane Wright call-up last year, right? When Shane came up and he scored all those goals, how many of those were primary assists from Jordan Eberly, right? Doing exactly what I thought we were going to see this year, which was Jordan Eberly in the corner, behind the net, throwing the puck to the slot where Shane Wright's coming down, doing his thing, playing exactly where he wants to play. And Shane Wright receives the puck, knows exactly what to do with it, can fire it and score for you. I really thought we were just going to kind of see that continue. I did not have the whole role reversal thing in the cards. But what we're really seeing is that, yes, Jordan Eberly is going net front. He is going and he is scoring those dirty goals. And Shane Wright is like Mr. prototypical like grinder forward, where Shane Wright seems to just want to go into corners and outmuscle people, win board battles. He wants to go behind the net. He wants to go to all of the dirty areas of the ice and use his size, use his smarts, use the fact that he really understands leverage extremely well to box out defenders, to go up against guys that are bigger than him and win those physical battles. It's fantastic to see. I was asked on 3 separate occasions during training camp, people were asking me, hey, do you think Shane Wright's going to be able to like physically to like play on the inside, play the way he did in Coachella, that kind of stuff? And at each and every time I was like, he's like the one guy on this team I do not have any concerns about his ability to play physically, because he understands it so well. And he does have really good size. He's really built in his upper body, very broad shoulders. It's the perfect build for playing the way he wants to play. Don't have those concerns with him. And if you look at that Minnesota goal, everybody keeps talking about Jordan Eberly on that goal. There's another player in the crease when Jordan Eberly pushes that puck home, and it is Shane Wright. And my favorite is the top-down angle from that goal. If you go back, and if it's part of the highlight package or anything, you go back and you watch the camera down angle above the crease, and like Jordan Eberly like pushes the puck home, and then he immediately backs out and starts celebrating, and then it's just Shane Wright being like swallowed up by 4 Minnesota Wild players in the middle of the crease after the puck's already in there, right? It just kind of shows the mentality. He was in there, I think, first, and as part of the reason why Eberly was able to come in and nobody was really taking away Jordan Eberly was because Shane Wright was already there and had taken up all of the defense's attention. So yes, credit to Eberly for going there, scoring a really greasy goal, all of that kind of stuff. But like acknowledge the low-key assist there from Shane Wright for helping make it happen as well, from really driving the net himself and being able to take up those defenders and provide Eberly the space on the outside there. So like there's been a lot of those elements. On the flip side, as great as Shane Wright is at grinding things out and digging pucks out of the corner and winning these board battles, that's not what you want him doing. That is not what you kind of need him to be doing. You need him to turn into that difference maker offensively. You need him to be a guy who can challenge Jared McCann for the goals lead on the team right at the end of the year. You need that from Shane Wright this year. And that is why all along I've wanted a player like, Tolvanen has been the guy that I've named, but whether it's a Tolvanen, a Ty Cartier, Brandon Tanev right now, Yanni Gourde, whoever it is that you can put on that line instead of a guy like Jared McCann, that's going to take care of that work for Shane Wright and free up Shane Wright to be an additional scoring option on that line alongside Jordan Eberly. That's what needs to happen for this team, I think, to have for the team to hit its scoring ceiling is you need Shane Wright to be putting himself in spots to get goals. And right now he's not, because he's trying to support the two guys on the line with him. And so I think you just need to kind of take that away. He's doing it because he feels like he has to. You need to tell him, you don't need to do this. We're going to give you somebody to do this for you so that you can focus on being the special player that you are. And I think that needs to happen. And as long as he's got a guy like Jordan Eberly on one side and then certainly Jared McCann on the other, I think Shane Wright will just naturally go and become the guy who's going to be going for those puck battles. And I just don't think that's doing the lineup as a whole a service.
Right, that is one of the downsides of, I guess, just being good at both things, is that you feel like you can kind of do whatever you're called upon to do, even if it's not the best role for you. I agree with you. They need to kind of unlock his shot a little bit more. And it's a change I could see happening too. Like Dan's talked about, kind of viewing lines as two people, right? And you throw a third one on there. I think Shane Wright, Jordan Eberly.
Yep,
that's the pairing, right? And you can kind of flip who the third one is, but I think we've kind of arrived at that pairing that works so well, and it's good to see. Also, I wanted to mention too, you look at their deployment as well. They are being given tough situations that they're playing in. Yes, they're producing, but they're not sheltered. You look at what number that stands out to me is the offensive zone start percentage. Jordan Eberly and Shane Wright have the lowest percentage of their shifts starting in the offensive zone of anybody on the Kraken team this season, 18% and 25% respectively. Those are some tough situations they're being thrown into. They're starting in the defensive zone a lot, and they're moving the puck up the ice, and they're creating chances in the offensive zone. And so that's cool to see too, because usually you'll have younger player like Shane Wright be sheltered a little bit. You'll give him some more advantageous starts. Not at all. They're leaning heavily on him, and he's rewarding them.
Dan knows him, right? From Coachella Valley.
Yeah.
Like Dan trusts him.
Handle.
He knows what he can handle, and we're seeing that with him. On the flip side, RJ, Chandler Stevenson, right? Because I know like some of the talk has been, and like somebody brought it up in the post-game chat last night, right? You got 0 points through 3 games from your top 3 centers. Chandler Stevenson, on the other hand, has been sheltered in the zone starts. That line has not really produced. It's been the worst, I think, analytically speaking. The Chandler Stevenson, Berkey, Schwartz line has been the worst line for the Kraken so far this season. And I'm not surprised. Like this was the reason we kind of freaked out on July 1st when the deal was signed and they brought in Chandler Stevenson, because a lot of what the Kraken needed, Chandler Stevenson doesn't provide. Chandler Stevenson doesn't provide points. Yes, he had a decent amount of points in Vegas, but I mean, he was playing on a very loaded roster. He was very protected. Chandler Stevenson is not necessarily a point driver. He's not somebody who's going to go out there and try to generate offense for himself. He does not shoot the puck. His 82-game average for his career is 95 shots in a season. That is not, it's the opposite of a volume shooter there. That's not really his game. His game is not to go net front, something that it feels like the Kraken need to be doing more so. You look at any analytics model from him from before they signed. This was one of the things that I really freaked out about on July 1st. Specifically, I remember the deep dive. It's just a barren wasteland of net front offense from him. That is not where he wants to spend his time. That's not where he wants to go. So all of the things that kind of made him a puzzling target in free agency for the Kraken, RJ, we're seeing play out here. And the season started. Like, guess what? The player who is 30 years old did not completely change who he was just because he changed teams, right? Like that did not happen. There are still positives. He's still good at kind of being more creative than really anybody else on this roster, although that's kind of a separate issue because he's still just kind of above average at it. He's not like an all-timer guy. He is a good passer. He does understand how to move through the offensive zone in a way that pulls defenders towards him, open things up for his line mates, but he is not a two-way center, doesn't play great defense, doesn't go to the net front, doesn't generate a lot of points or offense for himself. These were all the concerns we had when the Kraken brought him in, RJ. And guess what? That's who he is here too.
Right. And you talked about the underlying numbers not being very good. You look at the Kraken so far this season at 5-on-5. There's only 4 players that have not been on the ice for a goal scored at 5-on-5. And Stevenson's one of them. His line mates, Jaden Schwartz and Andrei Burakovsky, are 2 of the other ones. Josh Mahura is the 4th, who has only played 1 game. So I kind of throw him out there. but it's also the shot quality. This is per natural stat trick. Stevenson, worst on the team in expected goal share. Only about 40% of shot quality, 39% of shot quality on the ice when he's out there. I mean, that's not good enough. And then also you talk about deployment. This is like the opposite of the Shane Wright thing. Remember, they were starting in the D zone a bunch, and the offensive zone starts about 65% for Chandler Stevenson. So he's starting in the offensive zone and then getting pushed back into the D zone more often than not. And they're not getting that share of shot quality either. So the numbers are pretty bad so far for Stevenson in that line. You mentioned the shots on goal. He's never really been much of a shooter, right? 2 shots in about 60 minutes of ice time through 3 games total.
Mm-hmm.
So he's not one to put the puck to the net, but he never has been.
Mm-hmm.
Really, it's just confirming, at least for me, a lot of the concerns that I had as soon as this contract was signed. And I think I feel pretty comfortable saying what I said earlier, just he's not a difference maker. He's just not an offensive difference maker. You know, he can make some nice plays for you. He can be a good distributor, but at least right now too, it feels like you have an above average distributor, but without any real trigger man on the line as well.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you put somebody else there and they click, but so far I'm just not seeing it from him.
No, I'm not either. And again, it's one of those, we knew it was going to happen, right? Like the writing was on the wall, like the moment he was signed, that this was the most likely outcome, and we're there. So that is unfortunate. What's your next thing that you want to bring up? Because I've got one left, and it's kind of positive. We could probably end on.
Okay. I mean, I have a few different ways I could go. Maybe I don't need, because I was going to say, like, on the flip side, Brandon Montour is
that was
like
my
excellent.
last one. Yeah.
Okay. So we can save that one then.
Yeah.
I guess. No, I don't want to get into that whole conversation. I don't know, because I was thinking of, look,
we are
I was
an hour
thinking
into
about
the podcast, so
yeah, we are an hour into the podcast. Okay, let's talk about Brandon Montour, because really that was the next one I was going to bring up anyway. I want to talk about him because he's been excellent.
Yeah. No, I mean, you talk about, Chandler Stevenson hasn't been a free agent, like, difference maker. Brandon Montour has been a difference maker. Like, he is so flippin' good. It's unreal. Guess who leads the team in shots on goal right now, RJ?
Is it Brandon Montour?
Wow, incredible insight. Yes, it is Brandon
Context
Montour.
clues.
I know, yes. Congrats on reading the subtext there. It is Brandon Montour. He leads the team with shots on goal. Just the way he can help drive offense, the way the team is able to rely on him, especially right now with Vince Dunn out too. He's really stepped up in a big way. We're seeing that he is the guy that Dan right now trusts the most, and the coaching staff trusts the most. He's had the most ice time, I believe, in all 3 games. I can't say for certain last night, but it would shock me if it wasn't true.
Yeah, he did.
Yeah, so he is leading this team in ice time. It's unsurprising given the way that he has played defensively. RJ, like, offensively, we knew what kind of special player Brandon Montour was, and guess what? He's bringing all that stuff over to the Kraken. I've been really impressed with his defensive game too. And the way that he will just kind of quickly and aggressively go after an opposing forward who has the puck in the defensive zone, steal the puck, push the puck away, just in some way make the puck move in the other direction, right? In the positive direction for the Kraken. That is just what Brandon Montour does in the defensive zone, is the puck just kind of reverses polarity and it starts going away from the Kraken and into the other team's zone. And it's just been really impressive to watch because he's so efficient at it, right? It's just fly in there fast with your stick, play the puck with your stick, right? Like, don't focus on trying to body somebody up and blah, blah, blah. No, you just need to get the puck away from them. Like, that's all you got to do as a defender. You don't have to lay the guy out. You just got to make sure he's no longer dangerous. And that's what Brandon Montour does. And then if he can, he's able to make a play up and out of the zone as well. So I've been really impressed all the way around from him.
Yeah, the closing speed. I'm glad you talked about that a little bit too, but just how fast he's able to close on an opposing forward. You can tell it catches them by surprise too.
Yeah.
You think you have more time and space than you do, and then all of a sudden Brandon Montour is on you and his stick is knocking the puck away, and it's really cool to see. I don't think we've ever seen that from a Kraken defenseman before. He just brings something unique there. Offensively, he's always ready to jump into the play too. We know he's capable of doing this. Like, this is as advertised, but still to see it. There was a moment in that Minnesota game. It was right before Jared McCann scored the tying goal, but Brandon Montour almost had the tying goal a few seconds earlier, jumping into the play, going between the legs. And it took me a replay watch to see it, but going between the legs for a shot, hit the post, but that's the sort of thing. Just no other defenseman the Kraken have is going to do that. Even Vince Dunn, I think, wouldn't attempt that. He's got the skill, but I don't think he would attempt that.
Right.
And then also that overtime against Minnesota, just looking at that overtime period, that's the best overtime by a single Kraken player I've ever seen. And I don't need to even think about other examples or check. Just fantastic. Both ends of the ice, whether it is pretty much single-handedly saving the game when Matt Boldy had the wide open net, gets a stick there to break it up, or then on offense where didn't have a whole lot of help with him, but he shoots it in from a little inside the blue line, goes and collects his own rebound, all while being pushed slightly off balance, creating a grade A chance. That really showcased the best of what he can do because he's such a good skater. He can be everywhere on the ice at once, it feels like. And he has the stick work to make those impact plays wherever he is.
Yeah, no, he has been so fantastic. Breath of fresh air for the squad, and just having somebody who can be the best player out there on the ice when he's out there and have it be a member of this team. It's kind of cool. It's pretty cool.
And play all those minutes too, which they really sorely need with Vince Dunn out. Which, by the way, news update, they did cancel practice today, so we won't know if he practices or not. Well, we do know, actually. We know Dunn will
he
not
did not practice,
Yes, but still no word for sure on that injury. But, man, they're going to have to lean heavily on Montour, but it looks like he can handle it.
Yes, it does. Brandon Montour has been super fantastic. Great acquisition. He has also been as advertised. It's actually kind of weird, RJ, that the two big free agent acquisitions have basically played exactly to what they were. A lot of times you'll see free agents come in. It can take a year maybe, or at least a couple months for them to kind of join the new team, gel. The fact that both of them have just kind of walked in and been the exact players that they were at their previous destination, that is kind of interesting.
Right. Yeah. Usually you'll see some kind of surprises. I was expecting to be surprised one way or the other by at least one of these two guys.
Yeah.
But no, even through training camp, everything, like the term I always come back to is as advertised.
Yeah.
And they both really have been.
Mahura has even, right, come in and played a pretty good game in that Dallas game too. So it's kind of interesting there. Interesting. Is there anything else you wanted to talk about? I know we're a little over on time. I know there was something that you didn't want to get into. Maybe you tease it. Maybe it's something that you want to casually mention, and then it's something we can look at for the next week of games. Maybe. I don't know.
I don't want to step on this landmine here. I was just wondering about the goaltending situation early on and if we had any concerns or not. That's all.
I mean, we kind of talked about it earlier. We talked about it yesterday, right? Philip Grubauer is going to be one of those guys that just kind of every game there's going to be a goal you wish you had back, right? You wish he made that save for. If the offense was better, it wouldn't be an issue. It's just it's in conjunction with the offense that it kind of becomes an issue. It's too small a sample size for me on goaltending.
Yes.
And that's kind of what I said last night when we talked about it. So I'm willing to wait until at least next week to have that discussion.
Yes, same here, and that is why I ultimately decided not to go with it.
Sounds good. All right, then. Want to remind everybody that tomorrow night for that Nashville game, we will be doing our live game commentary for our Terror of the Deep tier patrons over at patreon.com/Emerald City Hockey. Would love to see as many of you in there as possible. We always have a great time, and I'm really excited too because I'm also I want to see more from the Kraken and see all this kind of stuff. I want to see this new look Nashville team, RJ. I know they're struggling here early in the season, but I mean, they're just one of the teams that really made big splashes in free agency. I think it's going to be interesting to see what Steven Stamkos looks like in yellow.
I know it's going to look weird for sure. Brady Shea, Jonathan Marchessault.
I know, it's going to be.
I've seen him in gold, but I don't know. It's just not going to look right.
Yeah, so it's going to be interesting. I'm looking forward to that. As always, want to thank Queen Anne Beer Hall for supporting us and supporting the podcast and sponsoring us. Again, great place to go. If you're not going to be joining us on Patreon for that live game commentary, at least go out and watch the game at Queen Anne Beer Hall. Right, and enjoy it. Be surrounded by other Kraken fans. Watch it on a billion screens. Every direction you look, you're going to be able to see the game. So definitely go check out Queen Anne Beer Hall
and get the pretzel that Dylan will be thinking about all stream.
I know. Maybe I should get one and then have it for the stream. I don't know. Of course, it's not good. I got to be talking through the stream. I can't be shoving my face full of pretzel. So
we'll sacrifices we make.
I know, it's so tough. So tough. All right,
but you don't have to.
Yes, you all don't have to. You all get to just hang out. All right. So thanks everybody so much for listening. We'll see you all next time.
Hey everyone, before we go, we just wanted to give a quick shout out to all of our awesome patrons over at patreon.com/Emerald City Hockey, especially our Terror of the Deep patrons.
Thank you so much for making all this possible. We really appreciate your support.